The docking station above Vega Prime was filled with hundreds of ships from every allied species. They had gathered for one purpose: to see the humans' first warship. Rumors had spread for weeks. Some said Earth's engineers had made something revolutionary. Others claimed it was a desperate attempt to be taken seriously in galactic warfare. When the massive vessel finally emerged from the shadow of the station, the crowd's reaction was not admiration, but laughter. The ship was huge, but not in the sleek, elegant way of alien designs. Its armor was thick and uneven, its engines looked outdated, and its weapons seemed far too small for such a large frame. It moved slowly, as if it were dragging a mountain behind it. Pilots from the Cathari laughed over open comms, their high-pitched voices carrying mockery. Even the normally disciplined Jaren officers smirked at the sight. To them, it was not a warship. It was a joke. From the observation decks, alien journalists recorded every detail. They zoomed in on the rust-colored hull, noting the lack of energy shield emitters. They pointed at the engines, remarking on how small and inefficient they looked. A group of UVAC warriors made bets on how many seconds it would survive in a real fight. The station's public channel buzzed with sarcasm and disbelief. The humans, dressed in their dark navy uniforms, walked through the docking corridor with straight backs, ignoring the whispers and smirks around them. Their leader, Captain Elias Rourke, kept his eyes forward, his expression unreadable. His crew followed silently, their faces calm, as if they could not hear the insults. A tall Cathari commander approached, his silver skin glinting under the station lights. "Captain Rourke," he said, his voice dripping with false politeness, "I must say your ship is unique. Did you design it to frighten the enemy with its ugliness?" Laughter echoed from nearby officers. Rourke simply gave a faint smile. "It's built for what it needs to do," he replied, his tone even, giving no hint of irritation. The Cathari commander tilted his head, confused by the lack of reaction. To him, this ship was a death sentence for any crew foolish enough to fly it. Inside the command hall, representatives of each allied race gathered for the ceremonial welcome. Holographic images of their finest warships floated above the central table. Sleek, fast, and armed with the latest plasma cannons, these ships were symbols of power. When the Atlas, the human warship, was added to the display, the contrast was embarrassing. Its design looked like something from centuries past. The alien admirals glanced at each other, hiding smirks behind diplomatic gestures. A Krillian fleet officer leaned toward his neighbor and whispered, "If the humans think this will scare the Vrakash, they're already dead." While the speeches began, Rourke stood in silence, watching the reactions of the other commanders. His mind was not on their words, but on the secret buried deep within his ship. No one in this room knew the true reason for the Atlas's strange design. They only saw what they wanted to see: a slow, clumsy relic. They didn't see the reinforced hull layers that could absorb impacts no other ship could withstand. They didn't notice the sealed compartments holding equipment banned in most of the galaxy. They didn't understand that every flaw they mocked was part of a calculated deception. The humans had been underestimated before. It was almost tradition now. Aliens saw their short lifespans, their smaller colonies, their limited technology, and assumed they could be ignored or controlled. Rourke remembered the last time that arrogance had cost lives. He remembered the broken ships drifting over Tau Ceti, the silence on the comms after the Allied fleet abandoned Earth's colony to save themselves. That memory had burned into him and into the design of the Atlas. The laughter now didn't matter. What mattered was that when the time came, none of them would be laughing. As the ceremony ended, the Allied admirals moved toward the reception area, still talking about the ship as if it were a child's toy. "Maybe they built it to carry supplies, not fight," one joked. Another said, "Perhaps it's a moving museum of old human designs." The comments washed over the human crew like rain against steel. No one responded. No one defended the Atlas. Their silence only made the aliens more certain of their own superiority. They thought the humans were embarrassed, too ashamed to argue. Back aboard the ship, the crew took their stations without a word. The corridors inside were narrow, lined with reinforced supports. The control room was filled with glowing displays, each one linked to systems no alien had ever seen. In the engine bay, Chief Engineer Vega ran her hand along the metal casing of the sealed core, feeling the faint vibration beneath her palm. "It's ready," she said quietly. Rourke nodded. The Atlas might be the slowest ship in the fleet, but when the time came, its speed would no longer matter. What it carried inside would change the entire war. Outside, the alien fleets prepared to depart for the front lines. Their ships glided effortlessly through space, engines burning with bright blue light. The Atlas followed last, moving like a predator, conserving its energy. On the station's observation deck, the same Cathari commander from earlier watched it go, shaking his head. "Poor humans," he muttered. "They'll be the first to die." He didn't see the faint smile on Rourke's face as the stars swallowed them. The Atlas drifted through the black ocean of space like a slow-moving shadow. Compared to the sleek alien warships that cut through the void at incredible speeds, it seemed almost broken. Other fleets could cross sectors in hours. The Atlas needed days. Every sensor reading confirmed the same thing. Its engines were old-fashioned, its frame heavy, and its overall performance far below modern war standards. To any outsider, it was a waste of resources. But to the human crew, the ship was not what it appeared to be. The outer armor, dull gray and unpolished, was made from layers of composite metals unknown to most of the galaxy. The plating was so thick that some alien engineers joked it could sink to the bottom of an ocean and still stay intact. Beneath the armor were power conduits far larger than any ship this size should have. Those conduits did not feed the engines or the visible weapons. They led to a sealed chamber deep in the center of the vessel, a place only a handful of people were authorized to enter. The crew called it the core, and no alien had ever seen what was inside. Reports from enemy spies were laughable to the human command. The Vrakash Empire's intelligence networks claimed the Atlas had no advanced shielding, no warp cannons, and only basic missile systems. The aliens believed it would be easy to destroy in the opening minutes of a battle. Even some allies thought the humans had brought it as a symbol of participation rather than a true fighting vessel. What they didn't know was that the humans had hidden the most dangerous system they had ever built inside this slow-moving fortress. The project had started years earlier in secret underground facilities on Mars and Luna. Scientists had studied outlawed energy technologies, systems so dangerous they had been banned by every major interstellar treaty. These weapons didn't just destroy ships, they could cripple entire fleets in seconds. Most governments destroyed their research. Humanity did not. After the Tau Ceti betrayal, when Allied fleets abandoned human colonists to die, Earth decided it would never be at the mercy of another species again. The Atlas was the result, a weapon disguised as a relic. Captain Rourke had been chosen not only for his experience, but for his ability to keep secrets. Even most of the crew didn't know what the Atlas truly carried. They only understood that everything about the ship's design was intentional. Its slow engines were not a weakness. They were part of the deception. By making the Atlas appear outdated and harmless, they could lure enemies into underestimating it. And in war, underestimation was as deadly as any gun. Life aboard the Atlas moved at the same deliberate pace as the ship itself. Crew members trained daily, but there was no rush, no panic. They studied battle simulations where their ship appeared to be losing, only for the tide to turn in the final minutes. The younger officers often wondered why they were never told the full strategy. "Because the less you know, the safer we all are," Rourke would say. His words carried weight, and no one pushed further. In the engine rooms, the hum of the reactors was constant, deep, and strangely unsettling. Chief Engineer Vega often caught herself listening for subtle changes in pitch, as if the ship itself was breathing. She had overseen the installation of the core's power linkages, and though she didn't speak about it, she knew what the Atlas could unleash. Sometimes she would imagine what it would look like when the core was activated. The burst of light, the silence afterward. It was both thrilling and terrifying. On the outer decks, gunners maintained the visible weapons, standard coil guns, missile bays, and laser turrets. To the casual observer, these were the ship's main defenses. They weren't weak, but they were not the reason the Atlas existed. Even if those guns were destroyed, the core would remain untouched deep within the armored heart of the vessel. That was where the real war would be decided. The alien fleets still didn't understand why the humans had even brought the Atlas. In their eyes, the war against the Vrakash would be fought with speed, agility, and precision strikes. They couldn't see the value in a ship that crawled across the stars. Rumors began to spread in the Allied channels that perhaps the humans didn't intend to fight at all, that the Atlas would stay far from the front lines, pretending to contribute while others did the real work. Rourke allowed the rumors to grow. Every insult, every laugh, every doubt, he welcomed them, because the greater the enemy's arrogance, the harder their fall would be. Late at night, when most of the crew was asleep, Rourke would walk the narrow corridors to the core chamber. The door was sealed with multiple security layers, biometric scans, encrypted codes, and physical locks. No one entered without his approval. Inside, the chamber was dim, lit only by the faint blue glow of the core's containment field. The massive sphere at the center pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. Even dormant, it radiated power. Rourke would stand there for long minutes, staring at it, thinking of the day it would be unleashed. He knew that once the core fired, there would be no going back. The galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. Meanwhile, far away on the front lines, the war with the Vrakash raged on. The enemy was relentless, pushing deeper into Allied space with each passing week. Fleets were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Allied leaders called for every available ship to join the fight. The Atlas was finally ordered to move toward the main battlefront. Messages from other commanders came filled with mocking encouragement. "Try to keep up," they said. "Don't get lost on the way." The human crew read them in silence. As the stars shifted slowly past the Atlas's hull, there was no sign of urgency from its captain. Rourke simply sat in his command chair reviewing battle reports, his face calm. He was waiting. The core was waiting. The entire ship was a predator in still water, letting the prey swim closer. Those who mocked it had no idea how close they were to learning why this slow human warship had been built in the first place. The war had reached a turning point when the Atlas finally approached the battlefield. Across the comms, voices from Allied fleets reported heavy losses. The Vrakash Empire's capital ships were pushing through the last defensive lines. Massive explosions lit up the darkness as ships were torn apart. The faster alien fleets had already been fighting for hours before the humans even arrived. By the time the Atlas's heavy frame drifted into sensor range, dozens of Allied ships had been reduced to debris. The remaining commanders were too busy to hide their frustration. Messages flooded the human channel, some angry, some mocking. "Nice of you to finally show up," one alien captain sneered. Another said, "Turn around before you embarrass yourselves." Inside the command deck, the crew listened to every word. Some clenched their fists, others kept their faces blank. Captain Rourke didn't respond to any of the insults. His eyes stayed locked on the tactical display, tracking the enemy's movement patterns. The Vrakash fleet was organized, moving in perfect formation. They had built a wall of warships around their capital carriers, making it almost impossible to break through without suffering massive losses. The Allied fleets had been throwing themselves against that wall all day, and failing. Rourke knew charging straight in would only add the Atlas to the wreckage field. Enemy ships began to notice the slow human vessel entering the battle zone. From their perspective, it was an easy kill. Big, slow, poorly armed, and already too late to make a difference. Several Vrakash commanders ordered their forward lines to shift and surround it. The alien strategy was simple: destroy the weakest ship first to send a message to the rest of the fleet. They didn't know that they were walking into something far more dangerous. On the bridge, the air felt tense but controlled. The Atlas's crew had trained for this exact scenario. They had drilled endlessly on holding position under heavy fire. The ship's thick armor and reinforced hull could take punishment that would shred most vessels in seconds. But Rourke didn't want to simply survive. He was waiting for a very specific opening. "Hold steady," he ordered, his voice calm despite the growing storm outside. The first wave of enemy fire struck moments later. The deck shuddered as plasma bolts and railgun slugs hammered the armor. Sparks leapt from a few control panels, but no one panicked. The damage reports came in minor. Through the forward viewing ports, the crew could see enemy ships closing in, their weapons glowing hot. The Allied comms were filled with warnings. "Human ship, retreat! You won't last 2 minutes," shouted a Cathari commander. Another voice cut in, "Get out of the kill zone!" But Rourke gave no such order. He leaned forward in his chair, studying the movements of the Vrakash fleet. He wasn't looking at the ones firing. He was watching their carriers in the distance. They were still shielded, still untouched, but they were slowly drifting into a formation he recognized. It was exactly what he had been waiting for. Enemy fire intensified. The Atlas took hit after hit, the vibrations rolling through the deck like distant thunder. The shields flickered, but held. Smoke curled up from one of the side consoles, and a crewman quickly shut it down. In the engine bay, Vega monitored the core's energy levels. They were still within safe limits, but every hit brought them closer to activating systems no one outside the ship knew existed. She glanced at the silent, sealed door to the core chamber, and then back to her controls, her jaw tightening. The alien fleets watching from a distance couldn't understand what the humans were doing. From their view, the Atlas was barely moving, just sitting there taking punishment. To them, it was incompetence or stubborn pride. They didn't see the data flowing through the human bridge, the detailed scans of enemy shield harmonics, the exact timing of their formation changes, the positions of their most vulnerable systems. Every second the Atlas endured was a second closer to the moment Rourke needed. The Vrakash began closing their circle, moving into what they called a kill zone. It was a tactic designed to trap ships so there was no way out. The enemy commanders felt confident. This would be over soon. They didn't realize the humans were not trying to escape at all. The Atlas's positioning was deliberate, almost surgical. From the corner of the bridge, the communications officer looked at Rourke. "Captain, Allied fleets are pulling back. They don't want to be caught in the crossfire." Rourke nodded slowly. "Good," he said, his tone so calm it sent a strange chill through the crew. He tapped a control on his chair. "All units, stand by." The words echoed through the ship's corridors, reaching every crew member. Those who knew what they meant felt their pulse quicken. Those who didn't simply gripped their stations tighter, sensing something was about to happen. Outside, the circle tightened further. Enemy ships were now in perfect range for something they had no defense against. On the Allied comms, a confused voice asked, "Human captain, what are you waiting for?" Rourke's reply was simple: the right moment. He glanced at the tactical screen one last time, confirming the carriers were exactly where he wanted them. Then he gave the order, low and steady: "Prepare the core." Vega's hands flew over the controls, unlocking safety protocols and rerouting massive power streams toward the sealed chamber deep inside the ship. Warning lights began to flash on multiple decks. The hum of the reactors grew louder, deeper, almost like the growl of a waking beast. The crew felt the vibration under their feet. The core was beginning to stir. Outside, the enemy kept firing, unaware that every second they continued was bringing them closer to disaster. The Atlas still looked slow, still looked weak, still looked like an easy target. That was the trap. The humans had given the enemy exactly what they wanted to see, right up until it was too late to run. The circle of enemy ships tightened until there was no room to maneuver. The Atlas was in the center, surrounded by the Vrakash fleet's heaviest warships. From the outside, it looked like the humans had walked into a trap with no escape. The enemy's confidence showed in their movements. They closed in slowly, firing in calculated bursts, testing the human ship's defenses. Each blast sent shivers through the hull, making the deck tremble. Panels flickered, loose tools rattled in the maintenance bays, and the air carried the faint metallic tang of overheating circuits. But still, the Atlas held position, not trying to flee or fight back in any serious way. On the Allied comms, voices were growing desperate. "Human ship, you are boxed in. Break formation now," a Zaran commander barked. Another voice, sharp and angry, cut in. "You're going to get your entire crew killed." None of it reached Rourke in the way they expected. He heard the words, but his attention was on the tactical display. The enemy ships were aligning perfectly, their carriers in the distance still shielded but now locked into the formation he had been predicting since they first engaged. It was like watching pieces fall into place on a game board only he understood. The Vrakash fired another synchronized volley. Multiple hits struck the starboard side, and for the first time, the ship's inertial dampeners struggled to keep balance. Crew members gripped their stations as the deck tilted slightly before stabilizing. Damage reports scrolled across the screens. Outer armor plating breached in 2 sections. Minor hull deformation, no critical systems down. The gunners on the lower decks asked for permission to return fire, but Rourke refused. "Not yet," he said firmly. His voice was calm, but there was a weight to it that kept everyone silent afterward. Outside, the Atlas seemed to be weakening. Bits of molten armor drifted away into space. One of the missile turrets stopped responding, its barrel twisted from a direct hit. To the enemy, this was proof that the human ship was close to breaking. Their commanders ordered their forces to press in tighter, convinced they could finish it in the next wave. They didn't notice how the Atlas adjusted its position by mere degrees, lining itself up with the exact center of the enemy formation. In the engine bay, the sound of the reactors deepened to a steady roar. Chief Engineer Vega moved quickly between control stations, her hands running across touch panels, bypassing limiters that had never been touched in normal operations. The core's containment field readings climbed higher. It was still sealed, but the power feeding into it was now at levels that could not be sustained for long without release. She keyed the bridge. "Core's charging, Captain. We can't hold this state forever." Rourke's reply was immediate. "We won't have to." The enemy stepped up their assault. Plasma lances streaked across the darkness, impacting with enough force to send shockwaves through the Atlas. Sparks erupted from a console on the bridge, and a junior officer swore under his breath while putting out the small fire. A bulkhead door on Deck 9 jammed halfway closed, locking crew inside until engineers forced it shut. Despite all this, morale didn't break. The crew knew they were holding for a reason. The Vrakash didn't stop. The kill zone tactic meant closing every possible escape route while keeping constant pressure on the target. Their ships now blocked any hyperspace jump path, and their weapons were heating for an all-out strike. It was meant to crush any remaining defense the Atlas could mount. From the alien fleet's perspective, this was the final moment before the kill. On the bridge, Rourke stood up from his chair. His eyes scanned the display one last time, confirming every piece of the trap was where it needed to be. The carriers were locked into place behind the front lines, protected by ships that were now too close to maneuver without colliding with their allies. The formation's pride had become its prison. "Lock firing solutions on primary targets," he ordered. The gunners straightened in their seats, their hands hovering over the controls. They didn't fully know what was about to happen, but the tension in the air told them it would change everything. Through the forward viewport, the enemy ships loomed large, their hulls glowing faintly from the heat of continuous fire. Bright streaks of weapons fire crossed in every direction, but none of it caused the humans to flinch. The bridge lights dimmed slightly as more power was rerouted to the core. The hum under their feet grew so loud it was felt more than heard, like the deep vibration of thunder rolling through the ground. "Captain, enemy ships are charging their main cannons," the tactical officer warned. Rourke's gaze stayed fixed on the largest carrier in the distance. He could see the faint shimmer of its shield, the last layer of defense before the humans could reach it. In his mind, the countdown had already started. "Stand by," he said, his voice steady as stone. The enemy's weapons reached full charge, and their commanders gave the order to fire. A wave of energy blasts roared toward the Atlas, so bright they lit up the surrounding wreckage like daylight. At that exact moment, Rourke gave his own order: open the core. Vega's fingers moved in a blur, disabling the final safeties and releasing the containment locks. Deep inside the ship, massive armored panels along the hull began to shift. To anyone watching from the outside, it looked as if the Atlas was splitting apart. Sections of armor slid away, revealing hidden weapon arrays that no sensor scans had ever detected. The so-called small cannons extended outward, transforming into enormous railgun barrels. Energy arcs danced across them as the core's power flooded the systems. The enemy fire slammed into the Atlas, but instead of shattering under the impact, the human ship absorbed the hits and kept moving forward. Slow, steady, unstoppable. The mocking laughter that had followed the Atlas since it was unveiled would never return after this moment. The humans had stopped pretending. The beast was finally awake. The hull of the Atlas shifted with the sound of grinding metal as the last armored panels slid into their hidden compartments. What was once seen as a clumsy, outdated warship now looked like something built for destruction. The enemy's sensors went wild, detecting power levels far beyond anything they had recorded before from a human vessel. The massive railguns locked into place with a deep mechanical thud, each barrel glowing faintly as magnetic coils charged. Along the sides of the ship, launch bays that had been invisible before opened like dark mouths, revealing rows of sleek, sealed pods, each one carrying a weapon system the galaxy had banned for centuries. The Vrakash fleet froze for a fraction of a second, their commanders trying to understand what they were seeing. That hesitation was all Rourke needed. "Target carriers. Fire," he ordered. The core unleashed its first breath. The hum that had filled the ship rose into a sharp, vibrating roar as the main railguns discharged. The projectiles moved so fast that they burned the airless vacuum into glowing streaks behind them. A heartbeat later, the first carrier's shields collapsed as if they had never existed. The round punched clean through its armored hull, splitting it open in a burst of light and debris. On the bridge, the tactical officer's voice was tight with adrenaline. "Direct hit. Target destroyed." Rourke didn't smile. His eyes were already on the next carrier. Again. The Atlas fired a second volley, this time combining the railgun strike with something far worse. From the opened bays, the sealed pods launched outward. Once clear of the ship, the pods broke apart, releasing clouds of small, spinning devices that scattered like metal dust. These were the pulse emitters, illegal weapons capable of shutting down entire fleets by overloading every power system at once. The emitters activated with a silent flash. Across the enemy formation, lights flickered, engines stuttered, and weapons went dead. Ships that had been moments from firing stopped cold, drifting helplessly in space. Their crews scrambled to reboot systems, but the overload spread too fast. One by one, the Vrakash warships became blind and powerless. The kill zone they had created for the Atlas had turned into their own trap. From a distance, Allied fleets watching the battle went silent on comms. No one spoke, no one moved. They had never seen anything like it. The human ship, mocked for being slow and primitive, had just ripped apart the core of the enemy's forces in less than a minute. Inside the Atlas, the crew worked like a single machine. Gunners locked onto crippled ships and fired with precision, hitting engine cores and ammunition bays. Every strike was clean, efficient, and final. In the engine bay, Vega kept the core stable, her eyes on the power readouts. The energy output was massive, far above safe operating limits. "We can't keep this up forever, Captain," she warned. "Then we'll end it before it ends us," Rourke replied, his tone like iron. The enemy's panic was visible even from the bridge's distance readouts. Smaller ships tried to break formation and flee, but with their systems failing, they moved like wounded animals. The Atlas's forward batteries tore through them one after another, leaving nothing but drifting wreckage. The Vrakash had always prided themselves on discipline in battle, but now their fleet was in chaos. Rourke's eyes returned to the largest remaining target, the final carrier that still had partial power. It was attempting to turn away, using its bulk as a shield for the crippled vessels behind it. "Full power to forward guns," he ordered. The railguns charged again, magnetic coils glowing hotter, small arcs of energy jumping between them. The core's pulse synced perfectly with the charge, creating a resonance so deep that the crew could feel it in their bones. The shot fired, and the carrier's hull cracked open in an explosion that bloomed like a star before fading into a field of debris. With the carriers gone, the rest of the Vrakash ships were defenseless. Rourke finally gave the order for the Atlas to advance. Slowly, deliberately, the warship moved through the shattered remains of the enemy formation, picking off anything that still had movement. Each shot was final. Each moment was a reminder to anyone watching that the humans had brought a weapon the galaxy was never meant to see again. Allied commanders began to speak again over comms, but their voices were different now. Gone was the mocking tone. There was hesitation, even a hint of fear. "Human captain," one said carefully, "you have impressive capabilities." Another simply said, "Remind us never to stand against you." Rourke didn't answer either of them. His focus stayed on the battlefield until the last hostile ship was destroyed or drifting powerless into the void. In the quiet that followed, the Atlas slowed to a stop. The core's glow dimmed as power levels were drawn back into normal range. The hull's weapon bays closed, and the armored panels slid back into place, hiding the monstrous arsenal once again. To any future observer, it would look like the same slow, outdated ship they had laughed at before, except now, the galaxy knew better. On the bridge, the crew allowed themselves a moment to breathe. Some exchanged silent glances, others leaned back in exhaustion. Vega reported the core stable, though it would need time to cool before it could be used again. Rourke finally sat back in his chair, his gaze drifting over the wreckage floating outside the viewport. The Vrakash had thought they were hunting prey. Instead, they had found something far worse, a predator that had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. No one laughed at the Atlas anymore. The battlefield was silent except for the occasional crackle of dying power grids from drifting wrecks. The stars seemed dimmer, their light filtered through clouds of debris. Pieces of enemy ships floated in slow motion, some still burning, others spinning endlessly into the void. The Atlas remained at the center of the devastation, its engines idling, its massive frame like a shadow among the ruins. The crew worked quietly, scanning for any remaining threats. No one spoke about what they had just done, but the weight of it filled every corner of the ship. The core's deep hum had faded back to a low vibration, but its presence could still be felt. The power it had unleashed lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it, crew and enemies alike. The pulse emitters had been collected back into the launch bays, and the railguns were retracted once more, hidden under the armor. To the untrained eye, the Atlas looked as slow and outdated as before, but now it carried an invisible aura that made even allied fleets keep their distance. Far away, the Vrakash command channels were in chaos. Surviving ships tried to retreat, but without their carriers and with systems still damaged from the pulse strike, their movements were clumsy and desperate. A few smaller vessels managed to escape, jumping to hyperspace. Rourke didn't order pursuit. He knew the message had already been sent. Those who escaped would tell the story about how a primitive human warship had annihilated a fleet designed to dominate entire star systems. Fear would spread faster than any weapon. On the Allied comms, there was an uneasy silence before the first voice spoke. "Human vessel Atlas, confirm your status," a cautious Zarin commander said. Rourke responded simply, "Operational. No boasting, no explanation, just the truth." Another commander asked, "Was that legal?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Everyone knew the answer already. What the humans had used was not allowed under galactic war codes. But no one challenged them directly. No one wanted to provoke the ship that had just dismantled the enemy in minutes. Inside the Atlas, repairs began immediately. Engineering crews sealed the outer hull breaches and replaced damaged plating. Sparks from welding torches flashed in dark corridors. The crew moved with precision, still running on the adrenaline of the battle. Chief Engineer Vega supervised the cooling process for the core, monitoring its energy levels closely. Even inactive, it radiated a strange presence, like a sleeping predator. She knew it would take hours before it was safe to even open the chamber doors again. In the mess hall, the crew ate in silence, their faces pale but steady. No one celebrated. Victory had come, but it had come with the knowledge of what they had unleashed. Younger crew members whispered to each other, replaying the moment the core opened and the enemy ships fell silent. Veterans kept their thoughts to themselves, understanding the kind of fear such power could bring, not just to enemies, but to allies as well. Allied ships kept their distance as the fleets regrouped. The once confident commanders who had mocked the humans before the battle now approached with caution. A Cathari captain opened a secure channel to Rourke. "You fight differently," he said carefully, choosing each word. Rourke replied, "We fight to win." There was nothing more to discuss. The channel closed. The victory reports were already being transmitted back to Allied command, but Rourke knew the political fallout was only beginning. The use of the pulse emitters would cause outrage in the Galactic Council. There would be demands for explanations, threats of sanctions, maybe even calls to dismantle the Atlas. None of it mattered in this moment. Right now, the war front was safe, and the Vrakash had been pushed back farther than anyone thought possible. As the Atlas moved slowly through the wreckage, the crew scanned for survivors. Several escape pods from Vrakash ships were located, drifting powerless. Rourke ordered them retrieved. Some officers looked surprised, but he explained simply, "Fear works best when someone lives to tell it, and we are not butchers." The alien prisoners were brought aboard, their eyes wide with disbelief as they walked through the corridors of the ship that had destroyed their fleet. They expected a vessel of bloodthirsty monsters. Instead, they found disciplined, silent humans who treated them with cold efficiency. Hours later, as the debris field thinned and the Allied fleets began moving out, the Atlas remained behind for one final sweep. It was a deliberate choice. The human ship moved slowly, methodically, making sure every piece of salvageable tech from the enemy was collected. To the watching Allies, it was another reminder of the Atlas's patience. This was not a ship that rushed anything. It waited, watched, and struck only when the time was right. By the time they left the battlefield, the Atlas had become more than a warship. It had become a shadow in the minds of everyone who had seen it fight. The name would spread, spoken quietly in mess halls, in war councils, in the hidden corners of space where smugglers traded secrets. They would call it many things: the slow death, the silent beast, the predator in the void. But to those who served aboard it, it was simply their ship, their shield, and their warning to the galaxy. Rourke stood alone in the observation deck, watching the stars slide past as the Atlas entered Allied space. He knew the war was far from over. The Vrakash would regroup, adapt, and come again. And when they did, the Atlas would be ready. This battle had only been the first time the galaxy saw what humanity could do when underestimated. Next time, there would be no hesitation. The core would awaken again, and when it did, there would be no place for their enemies to hide. Word of the battle spread faster than any ship could travel. Across Allied space, commanders, soldiers, and civilians spoke about the human warship that had appeared slow and weak, only to destroy a Vrakash fleet in minutes. The name Atlas was now whispered with a mix of awe and fear. Some praised it as a savior, others as a dangerous threat that should never have been built, but no one denied what it had done. On the Atlas, the crew returned to normal routines, but the atmosphere had changed. Where there had once been quiet confidence, there was now a sharp awareness that they were being watched. Every Allied ship they passed kept a careful distance. No more mocking words came over the comms, no sarcastic greetings. Now, when they received hails, the voices were polite, almost formal, as if speaking to something they didn't want to provoke. The Allied Council sent an encrypted request for a full report on the battle. Rourke knew it was not just about the victory. They wanted details on the weapons used, especially the pulse emitters and the core. He prepared the report carefully, stating only what was necessary. The exact specifications, power output, and firing sequences were omitted. Those details would remain locked in the minds of the crew and in the hidden files of Earth's defense archives. The Council could demand answers, but humanity would decide what to share. Among the crew, there were small moments of pride. A young ensign in the mess hall told another, "They called us slow. Now they call us unstoppable." A few laughed quietly at the memory of the alien captain's shocked faces during the battle. But even in these moments, there was a shadow. The crew understood that their greatest weapon was also their greatest burden. If the Atlas failed in a future battle, the entire galaxy would see humanity as reckless for wielding such dangerous power. The Vrakash survivors taken prisoner remained aboard under guard. They avoided eye contact with the crew, speaking only in low, hurried voices to each other. One of them, an older officer with deep scars across his head, finally spoke to Rourke during an inspection. His voice was strained but steady. "We thought you were weak. That was our mistake." Rourke didn't respond, only met his gaze for a moment before moving on. The words were enough, confirmation that the message had been received. The Atlas was ordered to dock at an Allied station for resupply. As it approached, dozens of civilian ships and small patrol craft moved aside, giving it a clear path. From the station's large viewing windows, crowds gathered to watch. Some pointed in admiration, others in fear, as the massive vessel glided into place. Docking crews worked quickly, their movements precise. No one lingered near the ship longer than necessary. Even the maintenance teams from other fleets seemed uneasy, whispering among themselves as they passed. During the resupply, Allied intelligence officers made subtle attempts to access restricted sections of the Atlas. They were denied at every checkpoint. Human Marines, stationed at all critical points, turned them away without explanation. Rumors began to spread among the station personnel that the humans had built more ships like the Atlas, hidden somewhere in deep space, waiting for the next war. Rourke let the rumors grow. Fear, after all, could be as useful as any weapon. At night, when most of the crew slept, Rourke walked the corridors alone. He often found himself pausing outside the sealed core chamber. Even dormant, it seemed to radiate an energy that pressed against the walls. He thought about the day they had activated it, the way the ship had transformed, the way the enemy had fallen apart. It had been perfect. But perfection came with a cost. Each use of the core pushed the systems to their limits. If it failed mid-battle, there would be no second chance. A message arrived from Earth, encrypted and marked urgent. It was short, only a few lines. Your actions have secured our place in this war. Proceed as planned. Trust no one. Rourke destroyed the message after reading it twice. The Council on Earth knew what was at stake. The Atlas was not just a warship, it was a test. If humanity could wield such power without losing control, they would never again be treated as the weakest race in the galaxy. The station's repairs were completed, and the Atlas prepared to depart. As it pulled away, the comms filled with formal farewells from Allied ships. "Safe travels, Atlas," one voice said. Another added, "May we never face you as an enemy." Rourke gave no reply, letting the silence speak for itself. Out in the open void again, the ship's engines burned steady, carrying them toward their next assignment. The crew knew it was only a matter of time before the Vrakash struck again. This victory had hurt them badly, but empires as vast as theirs did not fall from a single battle. They would regroup, adapt, and try to find a way to counter the Atlas. Until then, the humans would keep moving, keep watching, and keep their secret weapon hidden until the moment it was needed most. The galaxy had learned a lesson in fear, but Rourke intended to make sure it never forgot. The next broadcast from the Atlas to the galaxy was short, deliberate, and carried a weight that made even veteran soldiers pause. Rourke appeared on every Allied and neutral channel, standing on the bridge with the Earth flag behind him. His voice was calm, without any boast. "We built this ship because we knew what was coming. Next time, we won't wait to be attacked." The message lasted less than 10 seconds, then the transmission cut, leaving nothing but silence across comms. It was not a threat shouted in rage, it was a promise spoken with certainty. In the hours that followed, reactions poured in from every corner of known space. On human worlds, there was celebration. News feeds replayed the battle footage, turning the Atlas into a symbol of strength. Families who had lost loved ones in earlier defeats felt pride for the first time in years. On Allied planets, the response was more complicated. Some praised the humans for saving the front lines. Others feared that the Atlas's weapons would destabilize the delicate balance between species. In neutral territories, merchants and mercenaries began whispering that humans were no longer the weakest race in the galaxy. They were now something to be avoided. On Vrakash worlds, the story was told differently. The official broadcast called the defeat a temporary setback caused by human treachery. Their leaders vowed revenge, promising that the next battle would see the Atlas destroyed. But beneath the propaganda, fear was spreading. Survivors from the battle spoke of a weapon they could not counter, a ship that moved like prey until it struck like a predator. Some claimed the humans had built more than one Atlas, hiding them across the stars. The Vrakash military began diverting resources to research any possible weakness in the ship's design, though they had almost no real data to work with. Aboard the Atlas, life returned to its quiet, steady rhythm. The crew carried out maintenance drills, monitored deep space channels, and continued their slow patrol across the contested border. But something had shifted permanently. Every alien vessel they encountered kept a respectful distance. When hails came, they were polite and formal. No one joked about the Atlas's speed anymore. The insults that had once filled the comms were gone, replaced by cautious greetings or complete silence. In the core chamber, the massive sphere sat dormant, its blue glow faint. Vega stood before it one evening, listening to the steady hum that never truly faded. She knew they had pushed it close to its limits in the last battle. One miscalculation, and it could have destroyed them along with the enemy. But she also knew it had done exactly what it was designed for. ending the fight before it could drag on. She ran her hand along the reinforced casing, feeling the cool vibration of restrained power, then locked the chamber again. Rourke spent long hours in his private quarters reviewing reports. The Allied Council's demands for technical details had grown more insistent. They wanted schematics, power readings, anything that would explain how the Atlas had crippled an entire fleet. He refused every request. The less they knew, the safer Earth would be. In one encrypted message to Earth's Defense Command, he wrote, "The Atlas remains our ace. We will not share it. We will not weaken it for politics." The reply came quickly. Agreed. Maintain course. The war front remained tense. Scouts reported that the Vrakash were gathering ships for another offensive. Allied fleets prepared to meet them, but this time they spoke openly of requesting the Atlas's presence before committing to battle. Even those who had doubted the humans before now wanted their ship nearby. Rourke accepted the requests selectively, choosing only the missions where the Atlas's presence would make the greatest difference. He was careful not to reveal too much. If the core became predictable, the enemy might find a counter. One night, as the ship traveled through a quiet sector, the comms officer reported a direct message from a Kekathari admiral. The alien's face appeared on the bridge display, his tone unusually respectful. "Captain Rourke, your actions changed the war. But be careful. The galaxy does not forget power, and it does not forgive those who keep it to themselves." Rourke simply nodded. "We remember who stood with us, Admiral, and who didn't." The channel closed without another word. The crew understood what their captain meant. The Atlas was not just a weapon, it was a shield for humanity's future. It existed because the galaxy had once let humans bleed and die alone. Now it ensured that no one could ever ignore them again. The same allies who once saw humans as expendable now treated them with the caution reserved for the most dangerous powers in the galaxy. Weeks later, the Atlas crossed into neutral space for resupply. Civilian ships slowed to watch it pass. Some sent quiet messages of respect, others simply observed in silence. Its reputation traveled ahead of it, a shadow larger than the ship itself. Even without firing a shot, it commanded the space around it. Rourke stood on the observation deck, hands clasped behind his back, watching the stars drift past. He knew the Atlas would fight again, soon. The Vrakash would not rest, and neither would the humans. But the next time they entered a battlefield, it would be different. There would be no mocking laughter, no underestimation. Every enemy would see the slow warship arrive and wonder if this would be the day it turned its guns on them. The core slept now, but it would awaken again. And when it did, the galaxy would remember why the Atlas had become their worst nightmare.